everyone to our CISO live event, a webinar where we've established a panel of experts and Rob to to answer your questions about cybersecurity. We've had quite a few submitted already, so we're going to get to those here in just a moment. But I just wanted to briefly introduce our panel, or allow our panel to introduce themselves. With Cynamics, the founder and CEO, we have Eyal Shiv. Did I get that close? Okay.
Yeah, you got it right. Thanks.
If you'd like to say a few words to introduce yourself, please, sir.
Yeah, so thank you so much. Eyal Shiv, founder and CEO of Cynamics, an AI-based network visibility solution, and a newly partner with Stealth-ISS. Very excited about this opportunity.
Well, glad to have you. And next we have Philip Kohler.
Good day. I'm currently doing consulting work. I've served as a CIO, CISO, both work in government and commercial systems, and I'm happy to be here today.
Well, glad to have you, Philip. And we also have Shane Markley.
Hey guys, thanks for the time. Shane Markley, currently SE with Palo Alto Networks, but also a certified CISO. Looking forward to working with everybody.
All right. And then from Stealth Group, we have our Queen Bee, ruler of all things, and self-proclaimed geek, Dasha Deckwerth.
Hi everyone, thanks for the intro, Todd. Yeah, I am a geek. I love security, very passionate about it, and excited to be on this panel to share some of the insights that we have and answer the questions. Thanks for having us.
Glad we've done this, and as I jokingly said, we've got Rob, who I typically drag up from the basement and allow him to speak every once in a while. Rob Davis is our CEO of Stealth Group, so go ahead and introduce yourself, Rob.
You just did it, and thanks for allowing me out of the basement. So, yeah, been doing this for quite some time, IT and IT security, so happy to help. That's what we're here for. So give us your best questions, ladies and gentlemen, please.
All right, so just to reiterate, this is a very casual event. Our goal is to answer your questions and make our panel available to gets their input on various topics. Of course, COVID-19 is going to be one of the first things, because a lot of people have been asking questions about that. If you have questions, I will repeat, you can go to slido.com, enter number 87472. That gives you access to our question entering system, where we will be able to then add your questions to the questions we've already been submitted. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. So the first question panel that we've gotten, go ahead. I'm sorry. The first question that we've gotten are, what are the biggest cybersecurity threats right now during COVID-19 that you're seeing?
I'll give it a go. So from what I've seen, I mean, everybody, or a lot of people are working remotely, and having companies, I think part of that is part of planning, where the companies did not necessarily have the right tools in place to send their employees off and work remotely. So I think the challenge here is a lot of folks are using their own home computers, where the kids have their games and not really the right protection, working on company systems and company files, company data, or connecting into via VPN to the corporate network. So I think that is a big problem for companies in general. And the other also is, just like any emergency or anything critical, is people become desperate. Here we've got so many unemployed people. They are looking for opportunities to research, and whenever they get an email about how to refinance or anything like that, they of course will look into it. And there's a lot of hackers out there that just spamming. Even us on the corporate side, we've seen it. We've got so many spams of, hey, do you want to refinance? Do you want a loan? Do you want this? Basically, they take advantage of.
Nothing's playing right now.
and people, if they're not savvy enough, they just click on it, get a virus, get connected to corporate network, and just pretty much get systems infected. That's what I've seen so far.
Okay. Any other panel members have anything to add?
Well, and there's still the same actors in terms of industrial espionage and state actors. So if your company's involved in biomedical research or other areas, you know, there's still significant threat there. Then if your workspace is, your workers are dispersed, there's potentially an easier in with malware. So it really calls for a time to reassess your risk, overall risk assessment and risk posture possibly, and then focus on the top 2 or 3 things, because we can't play whack-a-mole with everything. So a good risk assessment and periodic review is essential.
Okay.
Yeah, plus one on Phillips and Dasha's comments. You know, we've seen a lot of you know, phishing and malware distribution using, you know, COVID-19 themes. You know, phishing emails subject like latest coronavirus updates, health advisories, business continuity plan announcements, and then, you know, back in March, did some research based on COVID-19 domain names. And you know, I think mid towards the end of March, there was around 100,000 different domains registered referencing things like you know, COVID and virus and corona. But you know, aside from that as well, reporting of malicious COVID-19 threat maps. So appearing to be legitimate threat maps showing the distribution of the COVID-19 virus, but actually embedding malware within them as well.
Okay.
There is another angle that is being a great issue these days. It's the visibility of the mid-mile. So basically, as Dasha mentioned, many employees working remotely, but not only the endpoints are the weakest link. So that's also a concern that is being evolving, and yeah, that's something that needs to be addressed and pay attention to.
All right. Well, and the next 3 questions actually kind of tie together. So it's, how can I improve my security posture during COVID-19? And obviously, because of the remote workforce, what are some of those best practices for protecting the remote workforce? And is any of the home networking gear secure enough for businesses? So I think those all kind of tie together. So I'm going to throw them out that way, and let's see what our experts have to say.
You know, I help, you know, I think we've all become the IT support for our local office at home for our students and folks that are teachers. And then, you know, I've got friends that run businesses, so I get pulled in, I get the same kind of question. And simply what I tell them is that, you know, don't use the free antivirus malware or free antivirus detection, right? Look, there's some things on the market that are based more on behavior that do a much better job than signature-based. Also for small business, there's a couple of firewalls that are, again, behavior-based and do great at screening out and are can either be remotely managed, or you can get somebody local to help manage a small firewall. And then if you're looking at your business, it might be a time to upgrade to a mesh network. Even in your home, if you've got folks spread out through the house, then that low Wi-Fi signal can become a problem. Some of those offer additional security features beyond what you just get from your service provider, from Fios or Comcast or whoever. So there's a number of ways, easy ways, incremental, not huge cost, that you can improve your small business or even working at home to take a look at some of the newer technologies that are out there and do a better job than some of the traditional stuff you may be accustomed to.
One thing I would like to add to this, I mean, it's in general, my view is to the question, what do you do now? Well, I think it's always best to avoid a ad hoc approach. So I think we have to go back into planning. As a business, I think you should, or in some industries, it's required that you have good planning, business continuity, and kind of look forward as a business. So it would, I know it doesn't really answer the question as in what I agree with Philip said, but before you get to this emergency situation as a business, if you have even a ad hoc, well, not ad hoc, even if you have a plan that gives you a limited number of VPN connections and additional laptops that you can distribute to your key personnel, especially finances, HR, somebody that where you are required to have really good security in place, then that is already one step forward. So I think at this point we should all take a look at how we got into this situation, how we're dealing with it, and maybe once we get out of this, take a look at, okay, what have we learned out of this as a company, as individuals, what have we clicked on, what did we miss, how can we take some additional steps going forward to avoid the scrambling and hoping everything will work out.
Okay. Anyone else?
Well, Dasha, the continuity of operations planning, or COOP, is a key function. So even if you don't have like the pandemic COOP, and how many businesses did, right? But if you're on the East Coast, you've got continuity operation planning probably for hurricane. In San Diego, you have fires and smoke. So it would be actually to take those continuity of operation plans and take out what you can use, because you still have remote workers and resources. It's just usually the scale for this is a lot larger. So use what you've already developed. Somebody's already thought about this potentially. So build on that thought process. And even like any plan, I'm an old military guy, so it's like you develop a plan and a concept. Now, when you get to contact, that plan disappears because situation is different. But having gone through that thought process and that planning, you can adapt. The key thing is adapting to the new situation, not having the perfect plan going into it.
Yeah, 100% agree.
And this is
Yeah,
Dr. This is Dr. Hollis. I would add this, that a lot of people working from home now, you guys mentioned VPNs, but also they should start looking at the NIST framework, for example, making sure the passwords are the correct length. And also there's a NIST framework for working from home. So while a lot of people are working from home, or a lot of people go in the coffee shop, you always have to be mindful of the security aspect of it, because if you're not secure, if you're logging into your particular servers, and you don't have that VPN or strong passwords, you can be breached. And a lot of people don't realize that how, as you guys mentioned earlier, a lot of phishing is going on now with the COVID or with other issues. And people got to be mindful at all times that they can be breached, and make sure you have that extra level of security.
Valid point.
And so when you look at your current risk environment, those things you need to look at, as you mentioned, VPN, potentially two-factor authentication, rolling it out to some key personnel. You don't roll, it's looking at what applies appropriately. So there's less expensive two-factor authentication systems out there, but the FIDO Alliance, for instance. But look at your environment, look at your users, look at and tailor an approach. Just don't start rolling out tools.
That, and also, even if you have to roll out tools, it does not always mean that you have to roll it out across the entire enterprise. And I think that's where a lot of companies are afraid of talking about security, or not really wanting to get into this discussion, is because they see security as a cost, which, yeah, to some extent it is, but it also helps you to run a business. But just because you buy a tool like multi-factor authentication and you have 50 users as a small business, for example, it does not mean you have to roll it out to every single user or every single application. There's always what we call the golden nuggets. It's you identify what is your critical asset, what is your critical application. Is it usually it's finances, HR, payroll, maybe some client projects that you're working on, research and development documents. So you can always, no matter what the solution is or what you do, you can always scale it down to adapt to your organization. It does not have to be expensive, does not have to be complicated, but you need to protect what is, as a business, what is critical for you to stay in business.
Yeah, it's a great point, and great call out by Dr. Eric for the NIST guide for teleworking. The CIS top 20 critical security controls also has a guide for CIS teleworking and small office network security guide, and then also they have information based on 4 different CIS security controls that apply to securing your home network. And to piggyback off of what Dasha was saying as well, is you think of the critical security control 1 and 2 are mainly based on asset and software inventory. So determining what you have from both a hardware asset perspective and then a software asset perspective as well. And then from there you can determine what's the best controls to place around those specific assets.
Okay. Good point. All right, so kind of following still in line with the COVID-19, and I know Rob, I'd appreciate his chiming in, because he was very proactive in his response to COVID-19 when he made some decisions for us as Stealth Group. What should we expect in the next 6 to 18 months in cybersecurity best practices as a result of COVID-19 and the changes that it have occurred already in the business landscape?
Wow.
I know you're big on trends and following things and being able to make decisions on predictions.
So I think the best thing, I like to take positives. So I think the virus and the reaction to it has opened some folks' eyes and helped educate some folks. The agenda item of cybersecurity, it's gone up the agenda. It's not top, but certainly folks, there's a lot more press coverage purely because folks are working remotely and they don't necessarily have enterprise level security protection. So folks are learning that not just the vocabulary of Dr. Fauci, but also that they're learning picking up a few words about. I've got friends calling me saying, "Hey, what's a VPN?" Things like this. So all of a sudden, there's this raised awareness that by the end of this, I hope folks will at least have recognised that they don't have to be passive victims. It's very easy to just put a couple of relatively cheap things in place to protect themselves and their information assets. Longer term, I don't think anyone can look at that right now. I think for now, I'm just encouraged to see that folks are picking this up and thinking about it and talking about it and making decisions, whereas I didn't see that previously so much.
Okay. Anyone else have anything to add to that?
Well, I think we've seen with Twitter and Google, there's some companies are going to move, even post this activity to a more work-at-home workforce. So I think that's going to push a trend. They're looking at real estate in major cities where they may have a decline in real estate usage because some companies are more thinking long-term, more work at home beyond the next 12 or 18 months.
Yeah, fully agree. I think it was Business Insider quoted, only, it was about the difference in working from home previously and now, it was about double. So say there were kind of 20% working from home, the expectation is there'll be at least double those working from home going forward permanently. I know a lot of folks in the City of London, hence and real estate prices, commercial real estate prices in the city have just falling through the floor because it's not a matter of when the virus is over getting folks back to work. Folks don't want to go back to work. They've seen that actually working from home is a good thing. Their employers, getting over the trust issue, their employers have seen an increase in performance in general, I would say. And I know there's a honeymoon period and that will plateau out, but I couldn't agree more. I think working from home is a proper thing now and it needs to be treated accordingly.
And I think in the next 12 to 18 months after all this is over, and just piggybacking on what Rob said and Philip, that everything will go remote or will stay remote, is in that case security will increase and will probably be even mandated more than it is now. I mean, let's take a look at, for example, CMMC. CMMC is the new requirement that came out from DoD to make suppliers and vendors to the DoD compliant with security, which is similar to what was before, except now it's no longer self-assessment. You actually have to get a third party in to validate it. And if you don't have it, you will not be able to bid or provide any services to the DoD. Now, if you consider, let's take CMMC as an example, the defense companies, in some cases, they probably will have people working remotely. Now, how will you really take control over what they have? Even if you give them corporate laptops and they connect via VPN and they have encryption, you still have the risk of, well, you're working from the living room. Who all is in the living room with you? Are you traveling? Are you in a hotel? Are you, because working from home is working from anywhere. You can go to the beach, you can have your laptop there. Your employer is not going to know unless, as long as you do your job. So if the job is done, you can really be anywhere in the world. And then the question also becomes, you're traveling with a corporate laptop from a defense company. Can you take it even to Canada? Can you take it to Europe? I mean, it's suddenly this whole security will become more than just a technology and VPN firewall endpoint. It become a process, it become a geography solution, it will become physical questions that will need to be addressed. So I think that will become a lot more of a challenge for a lot of companies to adhere to all this.
That's a great point, Dasha, because I think some of the features that are offered, identity access management systems and so forth, like geofencing, right? So that if you go into an area that's not safe, and that's multi-level based on, kind of your profile, whether you're an administrator or normal office user, that those type of controls like geofencing are going to become more important.
100%, yeah.
I think that the threat landscape will evolve based on the telecommuting. There is a lot of different articles that talk about deepfake, how criminals are using your facial expressions in order to make them look like you and sound like you in order to get sensitive information. And you see like some initiatives that focusing on these areas as well. So it's remote connectivity from one end, but how can I make sure that my identity is not being stolen by a bad actor? And this is another angle. I know I'm throwing the conversation to a different area, but I think that's something that will evolve in the next 18 months. How you make sure that all those telecommuting tools that available out there are secured all the way, even if you take the call from Europe, for instance.
Also, I would add that even today, we're talking on Zoom. When the COVID first started, everyone was on Zoom. Zoom did not have the proper security. Now, Zoom, they added the proper security encryption to make sure that, collectively, people that are the organizations that are utilizing Zoom, they're secure. So the next 12 to 18 months is going to be Zoom, it's going to be WebEx. But the thing is, making sure when you're using those tools that you are secure, so you can't be breached from that perspective.
Yeah.
Good point. So I guess, we've been talking a lot about cybersecurity and the effects of COVID-19. And I believe businesses are now, this question says, how can we determine our cybersecurity budget? And I think there's a lot of factors that go into that, but I'd be curious to hear what y'all have to say about, whether they have one already, what things do they need to consider now? If they really haven't considered it, what are those important things that they need to start with?
That's a tough question, and I don't think there's a 100% answer you can throw out a number. If you do research, there's usually a guideline of anywhere from 10 to 30% of your IT budget should be allocated for cybersecurity. That number fluctuates, of course, but I think it really depends on. I mean, just going from small business to large business to different industries, you will have different requirements that need to be addressed. You will have different infrastructure, so you can't really put a number out there. I think I would, the approach we always do with our clients is identifying what is really critical. And that goes back to disaster planning, business impact analysis of what do you need as a business to stay in business. Identify those things first. And that's not just technology, that's also the data. That could be paper, that could be processes, key personnel, know-how. So it's not just the tangible items, but really the soft skills and the know-how that you have in your company as well. And once you have that, then you can take a look at it. What do I need? For example, finance server. If you need the finance server only to access every 2 weeks to do payroll, then it's a complete different requirement to make sure it stays online and is available than if you have it in AWS or in the cloud somewhere and somebody else is taking care of it to be online and protected. If you, for example, have a tool that already has encryption in there and it meets, let's say, DoD standard or data privacy requirements, then you're good. If you don't have it, if you do it on a spreadsheet, then you will probably need to buy an encryption tool for your hard drive where you have it or your database. So I don't know, it's hard to say. You really have to identify first what it is that you're trying to protect and then go from there.
So for me, it's a risk versus cost discussion, but you need to understand your risk. You need somebody to come in and take a look and give an opinion on the riskiest areas to your business. And from there, you tend to end up with a shopping list of things that you need to do to improve your attack posture. And from there, you make a decision, risk versus cost. What are the things that you can do, biggest bang for your buck, quickly, to improve your security posture? That's the way I'd answer that question.
I've worked with ISO 27700 Information Security Management System, which provides a framework for this. NIST has also provided guidance in terms of security management frameworks. And some of these can be adopted. They're generally, sized for larger scale organizations, but you should be able to scale them down for mid-size and smaller groups.
Yeah, basically choose the questions that are relevant and appropriate to your organization at that point in time. Yeah. And if you start on that systems management approach, it grows with you because you get better at looking at the risks in your environment and understanding it. So look at as a growth process, right? Not an endpoint. Yeah, it's an evolution for sure.
So typically, I know from my standpoint, when I'm talking to potential clients, there seems to be an imbalance between spending money on preventative security measures as opposed to detection and containment security. Can you give some insight as to that question as it pertains to why is there an imbalance?
I think you have to go back a few years ago, or maybe a couple decades ago, when security started to become a topic where security was pretty much labeled as firewall. Well, have a firewall, have an antivirus. That's all to protect you from what is happening right now. Over the last, I'd say maybe 10 years, the tendency has changed from detection to identification prevention first. So you want to be ahead of the game. You don't want to, the mentality has been changed from trying to fix the fire to let's prevent a fire first. And technology in that case, especially developments in AI, have helped significantly with that. Different feeds that you can get, indicators of compromise that you can feed into your firewall to show you those kind of things, rather than, oh, you have a problem and now you have to react. So those technologies, even though they're there, they're still in their infancy, or some of them are. They also are expensive, and then a lot of times they're also geared predominantly for the large enterprises. So if I'm a small business, I probably would not be thinking about getting an AI solution into my environment, because A, it takes a while to roll out, plus it's more targeted towards enterprise. So I probably will be forced from a budget question, and maybe also from a know-how. How many IT people do I have on staff? What is their know-how? What is their capabilities, to not necessarily go into those tools and be able to be forced to just work with what I have. Is if I have a problem, I fix it, I react to it, and not look forward.
So I would like to add to that that basically the first thing to do is to look inside and see if all the policies and all the security measures that most customers think they have in place is basically what they have in place. And once they assess any hole in the network or any misconfiguration of one of their security measures, that's a good starting point. And to add to the AI-based solutions, they're still at the beginning, but we believe that, and again, the group, when I say we, that you need to trust technology. And the idea behind technology is to make things more efficient, both from a performance perspective, but also from a cost perspective. So if you can automate certain things in your organization, that's something that will definitely help overcome some challenges when it comes to cyber security risks on the assessment level and also on the defense level.
Okay.
Yeah, Dasha, I remember like when you're going back, it's like we got hooked on defense in depth. And I think that's a lot of where this preventative mindset comes from.
Correct,
and,
yeah.
And there just may not be the realization of, you know, I think I noticed some skepticism of AI, and I have some skepticism built in. And where I've seen it work a little bit is already tied to a very good system with good algorithms. But if you try to throw like an AI label on top of something, beware. But there are behavior-based systems and other ways of approaching systems in your environment that, you know, that do detect and contain, and that can dovetail into border protection, so you have a more comprehensive environment because, you know, it's about balancing risk, not eliminating risk. And no matter how well you make your boundary, something's going to get in through that email or through a personal device. So you need that detect and containment capability in your environment as well.
Correct, yeah. And the good thing is I'm seeing a lot of companies that we, especially at RSA, but also a lot of our partners that we work with that are already putting this automation in that is also targeted towards the small businesses, which is great because the small business really is the risk. It's if somebody wants to hack into a large, let's say, pharmaceutical company or defense company, they probably assume, and they're probably right, that they have the firewalls, the enterprise solution, the AI, everything that looks forward and reacts automatically. They probably have a 24/7 staff, but what the target is the third parties that connect to that defense contractor or the pharmaceutical. And
the weakest link.
Exactly, the weakest link. So I'm really glad to see that there's technologies out there that use this automation and the AI and the algorithms that are available for the smaller size companies as well to get them protected, because you have to take a look at it at the whole holistic at cybersecurity, but also the ecosystem, the partners that collaborate, the suppliers that connect to the networks, the freelancers, anything that the single sign-on solutions that are cloud-based. You have to take a look from a big perspective, 360 degrees holistic picture.
So can I just underline that for our audience? Third-party risk is a thing. So you can look at your own internal systems and your attack surface, and you can, polish that up as best you can for the money. But don't forget to look at your third-party connections, because if they are breached and they've got an IP connection into your network, then you're likely next. So do pay close attention to your third-party connections. And clearly, when we look at people, process, technology, people are your first line of defense. That phishing email, that's the first place I would look if you're looking to improve your overall defense posture. Make sure that your staff know courses are free. They take 10 minutes. Just raise their awareness, and you'll find that you'll sleep a little easier at night.
And then in your environment also, we're in the age of internet devices and Internet of Things. So your HVAC system, all your printers are computers now. And most of the edge devices on Internet of Things that we're looking at implementing do have significant security capability, but it's the human part. Are those capabilities configured and running?
And I think that goes back to the basic stuff that we still see when we do assessments. We still see, please do change the default passwords on any device. I mean, really, even if you get your router from your service provider at home, yes, it comes with a preset password. Please do change that. If simple things like that, you have to do it. But it also then goes back to a security baseline for companies is how do you configure a server or a device? What applications do you leave on it? Which ones do you deactivate? You have to have, as a company, a security baseline, a gold image. And stuff that you don't need, remove it. Stuff that services that do not need to run, deactivate them. A corporate laptop, in my opinion, if you have games on there, they should not necessarily be on there. If you got Netflix on there, usually a lot of stuff comes in pre-installed on any laptop that you buy. Doesn't matter if you buy it private or as a company. And a lot of the stuff can be removed and only run what you really need. And that will decrease your risk right there.
And if you don't have experience in this, DISA implemented STIGs, baseline configurations for systems and so forth, years ago, and there still are STIGs in place for standard, IT platform development and baselining, and those standards are out there, and you can modify for them for your environment. But rolling out that baseline without extra services that have a risk, it's like even. How much we love Facebook. I run that in a secure container when I run it. I don't let it talk to anything else.
If we bring that back to COVID-19, right? So everyone at home is a network engineer now, right? Because their internet was a bit patchy, so they went and bought a brand new internet router, and they configured it per the instructions, and they got it working, and they're all very happy and proud of themselves. But they left the default password on. So yeah, it's just bear that in mind, ladies and gentlemen.
Hey, great point, all. I want to say that you mentioned earlier, I think it was you, Philip and Dasha, you mentioned about the third-party risk. Target was breached because of the HVAC. Target had great point of sale security. However, they did not have security on the HVAC coming in, so that's how they were breached, and they lost millions. And it's very important that you do a risk assessment on your third-party vendor, and you sign a service level agreement to make sure they are held accountable if something were to happen. And you may want to think about getting that cybersecurity insurance also, depending on the value of your organization.
That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, third party, it's And I think it still comes down to know-how and understanding. A lot of companies just don't have the know-how, and I wish there would be something out there to, maybe one website that would just say, here's your sticks or here's your standard configuration, because they're out there. That's free stuff. It's available. You don't have to reinvent it, so it does not have to be that complicated. And even third-party risk policies, sometimes it is worth to just get a lawyer and have them draft something for you to make sure that you as a company set the rules and the security baseline of who you permit to go and connect to your network, and also how they need to behave, what they have to have installed. It's just like at home, you don't let anyone in that you don't know. You do a face check. Why don't you do that as a company with third parties? Even your IT provider, your printing company, they plug something in. Yes, it works, but do they patch it? Do they manage it? Did they deactivate all the services that are not needed? Those are the questions that you need to ask, and you need to give the guidelines to your third parties, your suppliers, and tell them how you want them to behave in your network. And that's on us as business owners or as CISOs, and not the other way around.
I think an important point with the attorneys, it just goes back, well, I used to work on a lot of deals for HP and EDS, and I would spend hours, sometimes days, working with the attorneys to help them understand the risks from a cybersecurity or IT perspective. So sometimes they're going to need some help, depending on their background. But I'm just putting that out there because not all attorneys are comfortable with our world.
Sure.
Well, and I know one of the questions that came in or during the conversation today is addressing the risk from third party and supply chain attacks. And I know we've touched on it quite a bit here in this discussion already. And I guess what are those additional things? So you've mentioned that it's your third party, it's even like your HVAC system and all these other things, and then your supply chain. Is there any other things that as a business owner we need to consider?
Can I jump in here real quick? So if we're using, even for smaller business, sometimes going to serve AWS, for instance, right, for hosting, there's a piece that is too often missed. They just signed the agreement with the service provider, but there really needs to be a deeper discussion to make sure you understand. I think it's even tougher from a small business about the configuration and management, who has what responsibilities. There needs to be a discussion about that. In the deal scenario, if I did a large deal with somebody, I'd spend a couple of weeks working through the terms and conditions, yet we'll contract with Microsoft or Amazon, and there's a lot of details in there. There needs to be a discussion around those details and who has what responsibilities.
That's
a great point. I'd just like to add to that while we're talking about AWS. They, as part of their pitch to you, sell you what they call a secure solution, and it's very secure for AWS. But if you if you want, and you should want those security services protecting your data, it's an extra charge. Okay, yeah. So just be aware. Just because they're selling doesn't mean to say they package that and that's what you're about to receive as part of your hosting. Be careful of that one. A lot of folks have been caught out.
And from a larger organization standpoint, you don't just have to use your tools. You can put virtual tools in that environment and report back to your SIM. There's all sorts of capabilities, but it takes that extra effort.
Yeah, and the other thing is also what we need to keep in mind is third party. I mean, especially cloud, people think, okay, I'm getting from AWS a secure environment. I'm going to put my application, my data in there. It's secure, but legally, it's not. You, as the business owner, the data that you have, you are legally responsible to protect it. So, and that's where it really comes in to 100% to Rob and to Philip to make sure you understand where the responsibilities are and what you have to do. Because patching, usually an application patching that you put on the host that you get from AWS or Azure or anywhere is the responsibility of you most of the time, unless you pay extra for it. And that is not really very well defined. And then even if something happens, legally as a company, you will be out there who's held responsible for the data that got compromised. It's not going to be AWS because that's just legally how it has been defined. So you still have to make sure that you protect the data, that you have your own encryption on the device, that you access, that you only allow people to access that need to have it. You, for example, don't allow export of data. You monitor the connectivity and the firewall, who comes in, what comes out, and all that. That's still your responsibility. So that's really, and I think that's lacking a lot of understanding, and education will be required for businesses to make sure that they understand that this is the case. Just because you move it to the cloud, it's still your problem.
Excellent points. One of the questions, and we've talked about a lot of, we talked about budgets, we talked about costs, but there is another cost that companies can sustain if there is a data breach to occur, and that's loss of brand confidence. How do y'all, the panel, see that as an issue for them, and how does what y'all do in cybersecurity help with that?
I have an opinion, or I have an observation. So 10 years ago, if your bank was hacked, you would move your account immediately to another bank. Now, there's almost, there's client apathy almost. It's, okay, so my bank got hacked. Well, if I move it, that bank will just get hacked anyway. So, the consumer behavior has changed. They just see this as part of, the cost of doing business almost, and they're quite passive. That's my observation, and I just wanted to actually share that with the panel and see if that resonated at all.
I think it's almost, I just need to change my password again. And I get, you've all got these mails, and somebody gets breached, and I get the offer of monitoring. But if, frankly, the company they choose is one I don't trust. Yeah. So, but also there are monetary features to a breach now, and reporting features, and criminal action, and fines, and so there's this whole other piece of it, other than kind of the apathy that I think consumers may have. I don't see a movement changing that, but the landscape still has significant financial risk, and I think there are some companies that still don't want that to be tinged. RSA took a huge hit about 15 years ago. So I think it has a place, and I think some of that discussions need to happen at the board level. How important is it to protect your brand, and what's the risk in your IT environment from how you sell, how you market, and what risks you have?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So board members are parts of the general public too. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt no longer sells. You have to come at it a different way. It's about education and explaining and selling the benefits. So the whole FUD thing, that's so last decade. It's really now, as business owners and CISOs in this space, we have to build a rapport with folks and share understanding, exactly what we're trying to do here, to push that knowledge needle forward so folks recognize the benefits. But yeah, FUD doesn't work anymore.
Again, I would add this, that from the corporate world, any organization is going to have the top-down approach, and leadership, especially the CEO, must do their due diligence to protect that brand, because what's happening now is if an organization is breached, it's not just breached from the middleman perspective. Globally, it's breached. The question is, does from the cybersecurity perspective, does the executives, especially the CEO, do they embrace and they make sure from the organization that everyone has their mindset as for cybersecurity? Because if they do not, it doesn't matter whether the CISO, CIO, or whomever, if it's not coming from top down, organization-wide, it's not going to be embraced from the cybersecurity perspective.
You're right, and the CIO and CISO have a huge, if the CEO doesn't understand, there's a lot of work that needs to be done to help that CEO understand and help the board understand.
Yeah, I think to agree with all pretty much the consumer or the general population, I don't think they're going to be really impacted on or really take security and the brand name and all this into a lot of consideration anymore, unless something really major happens that will impact everybody, like outages, critical infrastructure. That's a big thing. Access to bank system. If the financial system, ATMs, all that banking system gets hacked, and we can no longer have access to our money, no electricity, no internet. If something like that happens, I think that's when the general population will wake up and start taking security important. At the corporate level, 100% it has to be top down. Unfortunately, CEOs don't really see that unless they are being forced to by regulations. But then at the same time, regulations also is just a slap on the hand, get it done. And I think it's part of us as security professionals to make executives understand the annual audit. It's a snapshot. It's a one point in time. 5 minutes after the audit, you may not be protected anymore. So to bring it across, security is a continuous 24/7 exercise that is part of business operations, and everybody plays a role in that. From executive all the way to the intern, to the part-time, to the cleaning lady, to anyone in the organization that really has to be part of it. That's the only way you can push security out there, and you can make people understand how it impacts them personally and how they can contribute. And I think that's key, and that's going to stay key for next, probably until something really major happens. And then we all become complacent again because, yeah, we fixed the problem, and then we'll go again, and then something major happens. It repeats itself.
We're back to cost versus risk for me. So there was a question on LinkedIn yesterday about why is it that huge credit card merchants are not PCI compliant? Because the cost of remediation and getting to that PCI certification is more than just taking the fines. And until that changes, it will stay the same. To your point, Dasha, yeah, until a company has some horrific breach that really is revenue impacting, yes, CEOs currently, in my opinion, see CISOs as a scapegoat. Okay, you can take the blame for that one, and I'll bring in another one, and we'll do something slightly different. That's the culture I see right now in companies between CEOs and CISOs. I'm opening that up. Does anyone agree with that?
Nobody wants to speak up. So yeah, no.
What is
we're all kind of. I mean, we're all CISOs here to some extent. So no, 100% agree, and it is. But it comes down to, I don't know who mentioned it earlier. It's comes down to, if the CEO does not believe in cybersecurity, if the CEO does not believe in security, you as a CISO will have a really hard time to get something implemented, to get the budget, get the resources, and make a change. So it's not a question of if you will be hacked, but when. And yes, the CISOs then usually the answer is, well, I didn't have the tools, I didn't have the staff, I couldn't do this, I couldn't do that. So yeah, failed at job, and therefore CISOs are just prone to move jobs fairly frequently, I would say. Not because it's their fault, it's because it's management not having the understanding and not giving the right tools, budget, and know-how and resources to actually do their job right.
Yeah, that was no disrespect to any CISOs anywhere, by the way. That was just an observation that, you know, you're kind of chief scapegoat in some situations.
No, I've even seen companies that are so centrally managed and sometimes overseas, sometimes in the US, that, you know, unless you're in that, everything goes up to a central hierarchy, right? It's not a distributed mode. And so the decisions take so long, and innovation isn't an asset. Innovation isn't a good thing. So it makes it doubly difficult, even for the CEO in a geographical region. And I see some of those folks in those environments change every 18 months, 2.5 years.
Yeah.
So management style plays a large part in this, and leadership style.
Well, I'm being respectful of time. We have reached our hour.
Yes.
I greatly appreciate everyone that has attended. Thank you, special guests, our panel, and their questions. We tried to get to almost everything. I think we touched on just about every question that was asked today. Obviously, there is a whole lot more discussion that's needed. So be looking for our next CISO Live event, and be sure to submit your questions early so that we can make sure that they get answered if we weren't able to address them today. Well, we appreciate everybody's attendance. And again, thank you, panel.